Welcome back to Sleep Serenity Bedtime Stories. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Before we begin, I want you to take just a moment for yourself. Go ahead and get comfortable. Adjust your pillow. Pull your blanket a little closer if you like. Let your body find the position it knows best, the one it settles into almost on its own, like it has been waiting all day for this exact moment. Take a slow breath in through your nose and let it out. Good. Tonight, we're going somewhere extraordinary together. Not in the rushing, urgent kind of way that the daytime world demands. Tonight, we move slowly. We drift. We wander through ancient corridors that have been waiting quietly and patiently for exactly the right kind of visitor to find them. The kind of visitor who is tired enough to stop pretending they have everything figured out. The kind who is willing to listen to something older than words. That visitor is you. So close your eyes whenever you feel ready. Keep your breathing easy and slow. There is nowhere to be tonight except right here, settling into the story that is about to unfold all around you, soft as the oldest kind of silence, and warm as the light from a fire that has been burning for 1,000 years. Let's begin. You have been walking for a long time. How long you cannot say exactly. Long enough that the memory of where you started has softened at the edges, like an old photograph left in the sun. Long enough that the soles of your feet know the rhythm of travel the way a river knows the rhythm of flow, not as something chosen, but as something simply done. The land around you is ancient. You can feel it in the way the ground seems to breathe beneath you, slowly and deeply, the way very old things breathe, the way mountains breathe, the way deserts breathe in the hours before dawn, when the sand gives back the warmth it borrowed from the sun all day, releasing it into the cool, dark air in slow, invisible waves. You are walking through one of those deserts now. It is night, or something close to night. The hour just past the last color, when the sky deepens from a bruised purple to something richer and more final. The stars have been coming out one by one, as if lighting themselves personally, as if each one knew it had a job to do, and was arriving quietly to do it. Above you, thousands of them now. Tens of thousands. You have seen stars before, of course. You have glanced up at them on clear nights, noted them the way you note things you have always taken for granted. Familiar, reliable, vaguely beautiful. But tonight something is different. Tonight you have nowhere to be and no one to report back to. Tonight there is only the walking and the darkness, and this enormous sky bearing down on you with a kind of gentle weight, like a hand placed softly on a shoulder. You stop walking. You look up properly, the way a person rarely allows themselves to look up, without anything to accomplish, without any reason to stop looking. And what you see, in the sheer quantity and depth of it, does something quiet and profound to the thoughts you have been carrying all day. It is as if they get smaller, not in a bad way, but in the way that things sometimes need to get smaller in order to become more true. The Babylonians knew this feeling. 6,000 years ago, they were already out here. Not here, exactly. They were in Mesopotamia, in the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which flow through what we now call Iraq. But they were doing exactly what you are doing right now. They were standing still in the dark and looking up, They built watchtowers specifically for this. Elevated platforms where a person could climb above the flat world and get closer to the sky, even by a few meters, just to see it better. They watched, night after night, season after season, generation after generation. They recorded what they saw on clay tablets using wedge-shaped marks called cuneiform, and they passed those tablets on to their children and their children's children, and somewhere in that long chain of watching and recording, they began to notice something that had always been true, but had never been fully articulated before. Everything moves in patterns. The stars move in patterns so reliable, so mathematically consistent, that you could use them to predict events years, even decades, into the future. The planets, what the Babylonians called the wandering stars, moved in their own more complex patterns, but still patterns. The moon moved in a pattern of 29.5 days that they tracked with obsessive precision. And the sun, rising and setting in a great year-long arc, bent northward in summer and southward in winter with the regularity of breathing. It was the Babylonians who first looked at all of this consistent movement and had a thought that would echo across every civilization that came after them. The universe is not chaos. It is conversation. It is order so vast and so ancient that it looks like mystery, but underneath the mystery, there is a logic as clear and patient as mathematics. They were the first people we know of to predict eclipses, moments when the moon slides across the face of the sun, or the Earth's shadow swallows the moon whole. They could not have done this through guesswork. They did it through 3,000 years of careful watching, careful recording, careful thinking. They discovered the 18-year and 11-day Saros cycle that governs when eclipses recur, and they used it to map not just the past but the future. They could tell a king centuries before it happened. On this night, in this month, in this year, the moon will go dark. And they were right. Imagine being the priest who knew that. Imagine understanding in your body that the sky follows rules so deep and so permanent that they existed before your civilization, before your language, before the first word of your first sacred text was ever carved into wet clay. What would that do to how you understood the universe? What would that do to how you understood yourself? You are still standing in the desert, looking up. You have not moved. And somewhere in the long quiet of that looking, you notice something. Not far away, perhaps half a kilometer, a little more, there is something low and dark on the horizon that does not quite match the rest. A shape that is too deliberate for stone, too symmetrical for chance. You begin walking toward it. The sand is cool under your feet. The stars move with you, overhead, as they always do, not because they are following you, but because you are part of the same turning system that they are, the same slow rotation of Earth that makes everything appear to wheel across the sky from east to west, the same planetary dance that those long-ago Babylonian watchers spent their entire lives mapping and measuring and pressing into clay. The shape grows as you approach it. It is a doorway. Not a doorway attached to a wall exactly, though there is stone, a great deal of stone, arranged in the kind of deliberate pattern that speaks immediately and without ambiguity of human intention. Someone built this. Many people built this probably over a long time. The stone is pale, almost luminous in the starlight, the way ancient limestone sometimes is, as though it has spent so many centuries absorbing light that it has learned to hold a small amount of it for the dark. Above the doorway, carved deep into the lintel, are symbols you do not recognize but do not find frightening. They spiral and branch and overlap in the way that living things overlap, the way root systems overlap underground, the way water and wind share the same air, the way any two things that exist in the same world will eventually touch each other at some unexpected point. You step forward. You cross the threshold. The air inside is different immediately, cooler, stiller, carrying the deep mineral scent of stone that has been sheltered from wind and rain for a very long time. Not stale, not closed off, just old. The way a library smells old. The way the inside of a great cathedral smells old. Like accumulated stillness, compressed into something you can almost touch. Before you, a soft light pulses from somewhere deeper inside. Not electric, not fire exactly. Something in between, something you have no exact name for, but which feels familiar in the way that very ancient things sometimes feel familiar, as though your body knows them even when your mind does not. You follow the light inward, and the temple opens up around you. The first great chamber you enter has a ceiling so high that it disappears into darkness, somewhere far above your head. But it does not feel oppressive or threatening, this height. It feels like standing at the edge of an open field on a clear night. It feels like room. And when you look up, really look, the way you have been practicing out in the desert, you see that the ceiling of this chamber is not dark at all. It is alive with stars. Not painted stars. Not carved stars. The stone itself has been worked in some way you cannot fully explain so that thousands of tiny points glow with their own soft inner light, arranged in patterns that you slowly begin to recognize as constellations, some familiar from your own sky, others that correspond to configurations you have never seen, arrangements of stars visible from latitudes far from your own, or in seasons when you have never been watching. Someone spent years learning the night sky to do this. Many someones. Many years. Along the base of the curved walls, there are carved inscriptions. You cannot read them, not in any direct linguistic sense, but as your eyes move across them, something happens in your body that is not quite reading and not quite dreaming, but somewhere in between. It is the way certain music does not need to be understood analytically to move you. The way a very old song in a language you do not speak can still make something shift quietly behind your ribs. The inscriptions tell a story about light. Not light as we typically think of it, the flicking of a switch, the glow of a screen. Light as the Egyptians understood it. Light as something that carries information across incomprehensible distances. The ancient Egyptians, who built their Great Pyramid complex at Giza and aligned the shafts inside the Great Pyramid itself towards specific stars, including Orion's belt and the star Thuban, which served as the North Star in their era rather than Polaris. They understood light as a sacred messenger. They called the indestructible stars, the circumpolar stars that never set, that circle the northern sky without ever dipping below the horizon, by a name that contained both awe and comfort. These stars were eternal. These stars were faithful. In a world where rivers flooded and droughts came, and kingdoms rose and fell like waves, The stars above remained absolutely, perfectly consistent. When an Egyptian pharaoh died, the pyramid texts described their soul ascending to join those eternal stars. The very shafts in the Great Pyramid, oriented with such precision that archaeologists have spent centuries debating their astronomical alignments, pointed toward the sky as if to say, "Here is the door. Here is where we came from and where we return. Here is the destination of everything that does not die." But here, in this temple, the lesson on the walls is about something more immediate than death and eternity. It is about time and light. You walk slowly along the curving base of the wall, letting your fingertips trail across the cool stone, and the inscriptions beneath your touch seem to vibrate with a kind of patient meaning. The lesson is this: when you look at a star, you are not looking at the present. You are looking at the past. Light travels fast, 300,000 kilometers per second, faster than anything else in the known universe. But the universe is so large that even at that speed, light still takes time to arrive. The light from our sun takes just over 8 minutes to reach us. The light from the next nearest star, Proxima Centauri, takes 4 years and 2 months. The light from the stars you can see on a clear night without any equipment takes anywhere from a few years to hundreds of years to reach your eye. Some of the faint smudges of the Milky Way represent light that left its source thousands of years ago. This means that when you look at the night sky, you are looking at a kind of cosmic archive. Every star is a document of its own past. The sky itself is a library of different moments, different depths of time, all arriving simultaneously at your eye, ancient light and younger light and light from every era in between, all collapsing together into a single glittering present. The ancients did not have the language of physics to articulate this. They did not know about photons or the speed of light in scientific terms. But they knew, in their bones, that the sky was old beyond comprehension. They knew that the stars had been watching the Earth since long before any human had the capacity to watch them back. They knew that something that vast and that patient was telling a story about reality that no single human life, or even civilization, could fully comprehend. And so they watched, and they recorded, and they built temples with star maps on their ceilings so that even underground, even in the dark, the patterns of the sky would surround them. The Maya, in their own part of the world, thousands of miles away, across an ocean the Egyptians and Babylonians did not know existed, arrived at remarkably similar conclusions through remarkably similar methods. They built observatories, the most famous of which is El Caracol at Chichen Itza on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The building is circular, positioned on a broad platform, with windows and apertures aligned to track the movements of the sun, the moon, Venus, and various stars. It was not a casual structure. It required extraordinary precision of design and construction, oriented so that on specific astronomically significant dates, light would enter through specific windows at specific angles at specific moments. They kept their findings in books, folding manuscripts called codices, made from bark paper. Most of these were burned during the Spanish conquest of the 16th century, a loss of knowledge so catastrophic it is difficult to fully comprehend. But 3 survived. One of them, the Dresden Codex, preserved in a European library, contains astonishingly accurate astronomical tables tracking Venus across its 584-day cycle with an error of only 14 seconds per year. It contains eclipse tables accurate enough to still be used for astronomical reference. It represents hundreds of years of observation and mathematical refinement compressed into a portable document. The Maya understood something that modern science would eventually confirm. The universe operates on cycles within cycles within cycles. And the sky, read patiently enough, reveals those cycles. The sky was not merely a backdrop. It was a language, and they had learned to read it with the kind of fluency that only comes from total dedication over many generations. There is more in this hall than just the Babylonian and Maya traditions. On the opposite wall, barely visible in the glow, are the outlines of a different kind of star map, one that corresponds to the night sky visible from the Indian subcontinent, where ancient astronomers developed what they called the nakshatra system, a division of the night sky into 27 lunar mansions through which the moon travels over the course of a month. Each mansion was associated with a specific deity, a specific quality of time, a specific set of favorable or unfavorable conditions for human activities. The sky was not simply a physical dome above the world. It was a living almanac, a guidance system, a map of the quality of each moment as it arrived. The Vedic tradition that grew around these nakshatra observations was already sophisticated by 1500 BCE, and it informed not only astronomy but philosophy. The Rig Veda, the oldest of the four Vedas and one of the oldest known religious texts in the world, contains hymns to the dawn and to the sun and to the stars that treat celestial bodies not merely as gods to be propitiated, but as teachers to be listened to. The sun, Surya, was not simply a deity riding across the sky in a chariot. The sun was a model, a demonstration of something about the nature of consciousness, its rising and setting, its cycle of appearance and disappearance, its absolute reliability that the ancients wanted to understand and embody. And then there is the Chinese astronomical tradition, which was already ancient when the Han Dynasty, 2 centuries before and after the Common Era, began systematically organizing all that knowledge into the comprehensive star catalogs and observational records that would eventually influence astronomy across East Asia. Chinese astronomers divided the sky differently from the Babylonians and the Indians, using a system of 28 lunar mansions and 5 palaces corresponding to the 4 cardinal directions and the center. They tracked the appearance and disappearance of comets, of novae, of unusual celestial events, and recorded their observations on oracle bones and bamboo strips and silk scrolls that form some of the most detailed astronomical records of the ancient world. What unites all of these traditions is not their specific mythology or their particular division of the sky. What unites them is the underlying impulse, the recognition that the sky is speaking, and that it would be worth the enormous effort required to learn to listen. And then there is the night sky as understood by the indigenous peoples of Australia, whose astronomical traditions are among the oldest on Earth, and whose connection to the stars is woven so deeply into their culture that it shapes everything from navigation to law to the timing of ceremonies to the understanding of ecology. The Aboriginal Australians were among the first people on Earth to make astronomical observations, with oral traditions about the sky that may date back more than 10,000 years. Their sky maps were different from those of the Babylonians or the Egyptians or the Maya. They included not just the bright stars, but the dark patches between them, the dark constellations shaped by the absence of stars, which they filled with figures of animals whose seasonal appearances and disappearances in the sky corresponded to seasonal changes in the living animals on the land below. The emu in the sky, for instance, is a constellation made not of stars, but of the dark clouds of the Milky Way. When the emu in the sky is in a specific position at dawn, the emus on the ground are laying their eggs, and it is time to harvest them. The sky was a practical almanac, but it was also far more than that. It was the dwelling place of ancestors. It was the record of the law. It was the source of the dreaming, that extraordinary Aboriginal concept for the foundational layer of reality, the creative dimension that underlies and permeates the physical world and exists outside of ordinary time. You stand in the Hall of the Stars for a long time. Above you, the soft glowing points pulse slowly, like breath, in and out. The oldest kind of rhythm, translated into light. You let yourself feel, just for a moment, what those ancient watchers must have felt. The sense of being very small inside something very vast. Not frightening smallness, the terrifying kind. The other kind. The kind that is actually a relief. The kind that makes the things you have been worrying about grow quiet, because they are small too, small in the best possible way, small enough to be held by something immense and steady and unconcerned. The Polynesians, who navigated the vast Pacific Ocean in outrigger canoes across distances that still astonish modern sailors, did so using the stars as their primary instrument. They had no compass, no GPS, no mechanical device of any kind. They had the sky. They memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of individual stars across every season of the year. They understood swell patterns and wind patterns and the flight paths of birds and the color of water above certain kinds of reef. But at the core of their navigation was the sky, trusted completely, read with a fluency that took years of training to develop and a lifetime to perfect. They trusted the stars the way you might trust gravity. They built their entire world. The colonization of the Hawaiian Islands, of New Zealand, of Easter Island, of every inhabited corner of the Pacific, on that trust. The stars breathe above you. You breathe below them. And everything is in its right place. You move deeper through the temple. The corridor connecting the first chamber to the second is narrow enough that you can almost touch both walls simultaneously if you stretch your arms out to your sides, and the effect is strangely comforting. The way small, enclosed spaces can sometimes be comforting, the way a tent in a rainstorm, or a quilt in winter, or the inside of any intimate shelter can feel more like safety than confinement. The walls here are unadorned, just stone, but as you walk, you begin to notice that the stone itself is beautiful. The limestone is layered in bands of cream and gold and a faint rose gray, laid down over millions of years of accumulated pressure, each band representing a different period of time, a different chapter of the Earth's own long autobiography. The rock is a record, It was always a record. Every piece of stone on the surface of this planet is a piece of archived time, pressed dense and patient, waiting for someone to understand how to read it. The second chamber opens up gradually, like a sentence that builds. It is lower ceilinged than the first, which makes it feel warmer, more intimate. The light here is amber rather than blue-white, softer and rounder, and it comes from what appear to be oil lamps set into niches carved at intervals along the walls, though the flames do not flicker in any way that suggests an ordinary draft. They burn with a steady, unhurried steadiness that feels almost intentional. The walls of this chamber are covered entirely in handprints. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, perhaps. They are pressed into what was once soft plaster or clay and has since hardened into stone-like permanence, and they vary so enormously in size that the effect is overwhelming in the most tender possible way. There are the clear imprints of adult hands, broad-palmed and long-fingered. There are smaller hands, adolescent hands, and scattered among them, countless child-sized hands, tiny and rounded, the kind of hands that fit completely inside a grown person's palm, the kind of hands that reach for things with total confidence because they have not yet learned to hesitate. Every single one of these hands was once warm. Every single one pressed itself here, for a reason you may not ever be able to fully articulate, but which you understand completely nonetheless. Because you have stood at the edge of places and felt the same impulse yourself. The need to say, quietly, without any fanfare, I was here. This was real. This mattered. The ancients understood something about stone that modern life has mostly forgotten. Stone remembers. Not in the way a hard drive remembers, not as data. In a softer, more physical way. The shape of a hand pressed into soft clay before it hardens is preserved. The groove worn into a stone step by 1,000 years of feet is preserved. The alignment of a massive stone toward a specific point on the horizon at a specific moment on a specific day. That alignment persists across millennia, because stone is patient in a way that living things simply cannot afford to be. Consider Göbekli Tepe. In southeastern Turkey, on a hilltop overlooking what was once a lush and teeming landscape, there are stone circles of extraordinary ambition. Massive T-shaped pillars of limestone, some of them standing 5.5 meters tall, some of them weighing as much as 50 tons, arranged in precise circular formations with two central pillars facing each other at the heart of each ring. They are 11,000 years old. 11,000. That is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, which is itself ancient enough to seem impossible. Göbekli Tepe predates the domestication of agriculture. The people who built it were hunter-gatherers. They had no metal tools. They had no pottery. They had no written language that we know of. And yet they quarried enormous limestone blocks from a ridge 100 meters away, transported them to this hilltop, and arranged them with a geometric precision that required sophisticated planning, coordinated social organization, and hundreds, some estimates say thousands, of workers. They carved the pillars with intricate reliefs of animals, foxes, vultures, scorpions, lions, gazelles. They decorated them with abstract symbols whose meaning we have not yet fully decoded. And then, when a circle was complete, they buried it. Deliberately. They filled it with rubble and built a new circle on top of the old one. They did this repeatedly, layer after layer, over more than 1,000 years of continuous activity at the same site.
Why?
The honest answer is that we do not know for certain. Archaeologists describe Göbekli Tepe as a ritual site, probably ceremonial, possibly funerary, likely associated with religious practice on a scale that would have drawn people from great distances across the region. There is no evidence of permanent habitation. People came here for something,
To do something.
to mark something. And what is extraordinary is what their choice of location and materials says about their relationship to time. They did not build in wood, which would have rotted. They did not build in clay, which would have dissolved in rain. They built in stone. They chose the most permanent material available to them, shaped it with extraordinary effort, decorated it with images they cared about deeply enough to carve over and over again, and then they preserved it by burying it. They put their most sacred work underground, safe from weather and war and time. They were saving it. For whom? Not for the next generation, necessarily. Not even for the next 100 generations. For anyone who would eventually come and look carefully enough to understand that something was here. Something mattered here. The stone itself was the proof. In this chamber, surrounded by all those handprints, you feel the weight of that intention like a kind of warmth. All those hands pressing themselves into permanence. All those lives insisting quietly on their own reality. You raise your own hand and hold it near one of the smaller prints, not touching, just close. Your palm hovering a finger's width from the impression of a child's palm pressed into stone a very long time ago. The warmth you feel has nothing to do with temperature. Stonehenge, for 1,500 years old on the chalk plains of Wiltshire in England, carried its enormous bluestones from the Preseli Hills in Wales, 200 miles away, through a feat of engineering and collective human effort that continues to astonish researchers today. The sarsen stones, the great upright gray sandstone pillars that form the iconic outer circle, were quarried from Marlborough Downs, 25 miles north, and many of them weigh more than 25 tons. They were shaped with hammerstones and antler picks, without any metal. Then they were moved, and then they were lifted vertically, their lintels fitted with mortise and tenon joints, a carpentry technique translated ingeniously into stone, and placed with astronomical precision so that at midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset, the light would enter through specific alignments, illuminating specific points within the circle. People do not do that for no reason. People do not organize generations of communal labor, do not transport unimaginable weights across unimaginable distances, do not engineer astronomical alignments into a circle of stone on an open plain unless they believe, deeply and collectively, that it matters. That the relationship between the earth and the sky is worth marking in the most permanent way available to them. They were saying something to time. They were saying, "We understood that you are circular, that the sun comes back, that the moment of its return is worth everything it costs to honor, that we are part of this rotation, not observers of it but participants in it, and we are marking our participation in stone so it cannot be forgotten." And it has not been forgotten. 4,500 years later, on midsummer morning, The sun still rises in exact alignment with the heel stone at Stonehenge. The geometry has not drifted. The stone holds its position. The relationship between earth and sky that those ancient builders encoded in limestone and sandstone is still accurate. The stone remembered. The stone still remembers. There are other stone monuments in this world that carry the same quality of insistence, the same refusal to be forgotten. The Great Pyramid Complex at Giza in Egypt was aligned not just with cardinal directions, but with specific stars in the constellation. Orion's Belt, those 3 perfectly spaced stars that the Egyptians associated with Osiris, their god of death and resurrection. The 3 main pyramids mirror the arrangement of Orion's belt stars with startling accuracy. Whether this was intentional, and there is significant scholarly debate on this point, the alignment exists. The fact of it, whatever its cause, connects the ground and the sky in a way that the Egyptians clearly cared about deeply. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of the 3, stands nearly 147 meters tall and contains approximately 2.5 million limestone blocks, each one averaging 2.5 tons in weight. It was the tallest human-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. Inside it, narrow shafts oriented with astronomical precision toward specific stars, toward the star Thuban, which served as the pole star in Khufu's era around 2600 BCE, and toward the stars of Orion's Belt, were built into the structure not as ventilation ducts, but as something more intentional. They pointed the way. They were doors in stone, saying, "This is the direction of what persists. This is where the light comes from that does not go out." The ancient Egyptians covered the ceilings of tombs and temples with star maps and astronomical calendars. The cenotaph of Seti I at Abydos, built around 1200 BC, has a ceiling painted with one of the most complete astronomical records surviving from the ancient world. Every decans of the night sky, every constellation visible from Egypt, the circuit of the moon through the night sky, all mapped with extraordinary care and preserved in the enclosed, protected darkness of the tomb. They were preserving the sky inside the stone, just as the builders of Göbekli Tepe were preserving something inside the earth. Just as Stonehenge preserved the movement of the sun inside its alignments. Stone as a vehicle for transmitting knowledge across time. Stone as the most patient teacher available to creatures whose individual lives were so short. The Karnak stones of Brittany in France. Thousands of standing stones arranged in long parallel lines stretching for several kilometers across the Atlantic coast of western France, dating back more than 6,000 years, are the largest such alignment anywhere in the world. Nobody knows exactly what they were for. Various theories have been proposed over the centuries, including astronomical alignments, ceremonial pathways, territorial markers, and any number of other possibilities. But what is undeniable is the scale of the commitment. To align thousands of stones over kilometers of landscape, pointing consistently in the same direction, required planning and effort and social organization of a kind that speaks of something deeply meaningful to those who built it. What was it? We do not know. And perhaps the not knowing is part of the lesson. The stone persists. The intention that shaped it we can only partially read. And that gap between the permanence of the stone and the inaccessibility of the specific mind that put it there is itself a kind of teaching. It is a reminder that what endures in the material world is the form, not the explanation. The hand that pressed into clay 4,000 years ago is gone. The shape of it remains. You let your hand drop. You stand in the warmth of the amber light among all those handprints, and you feel something shift quietly inside you. A kind of softening. The release of something you have been carrying, though you were not quite aware of carrying it until this moment. A low-grade urgency, the sense that things must be held tightly, or they will be lost. The stone says otherwise. The stone says, what truly matters does not need to be gripped. What is real will persist. The universe is not threatened by your inattention. The sun will rise in its alignment whether or not you are awake to watch it. The stars will keep their patient positions whether or not you are counting them. You can let go, even just for tonight. You can trust the stone. Hashtag part 4. The Garden of Breath. Hashtag what the ancients found in the silence between heartbeats. The corridor beyond the chamber of stone is different from the others. It does not go further inward. It goes upward, a gentle slope, barely noticeable at first, but steady. And the air changes as you climb it. The deep mineral cold of the inner room slowly gives way to something warmer, more complex, alive with a green, growing fragrance that you cannot place and cannot stop wanting to breathe in more deeply. The garden, when you reach it, should be impossible. It is inside the temple. It is underground or close to it. And yet it is alive, genuinely, comprehensively alive, in the way that only things that have been thriving in the same spot for a very long time become alive. There are trees with silver bark, smooth as skin, their branches reaching upward to where the ceiling of this chamber has been somehow open to the sky, or to something that looks enough like the sky to accomplish the same thing. Soft light filters through. Not daylight exactly, but not quite the amber lamplight of the previous chambers either. Something in between. Something very gentle. The ground beneath your feet is not stone here. It is earth, cool, soft, slightly yielding, carpeted in low-growing plants that smell of rain and green things and something sweeter underneath, like clover, like the memory of a field in summer. You take off your shoes without really deciding to. Your feet know what they want. And then you breathe. Really breathe. The kind of breath you forgot you were not taking. The kind that starts low, in the belly and fills upward through the chest and into the collarbones and seems to continue even past that into some part of you above the physical body that you did not know had been waiting for air. The out-breath is long and complete and sounds, to your own ears, like relief. The ancient yogis of India would have understood this immediately. The practice they developed and refined, and which they called pranayama, from the Sanskrit words prana, meaning life force or vital energy, and ayama, meaning extension or expansion, was already old by the time it was written about in the Rig Veda around 1700 BC. It was already old then, carried forward through generations of teachers and students in the living tradition that always precedes the written record. In the Upanishads, those extraordinary philosophical texts from between 800 and 400 BC, Breath is not described as merely the movement of air into and out of lungs. Breath is described as the vehicle of consciousness, the carrier of awareness, the link between the inner world and the outer one. Prana was not oxygen. It was not merely a physiological process. It was the animating force of the universe moving through the body of a living being, accessible to anyone willing to pay attention to it. Vayu, the Vedic deity of wind and breath, was praised in the Upanishads as prana itself, the life breath of the world. When the Chandogya Upanishad says that breath is the leader of all life forces, it is making a claim that modern respiratory medicine would recognize from a different angle. The nervous system's response to breath is profound, measurable, and far-reaching. The ancients articulated this as sacred truth. The scientists articulate it as biochemistry. Both are pointing at the same thing. In ancient Egypt, the concept of the Ka, the vital life force that inhabited every person, distinct from the physical body and from the soul, or Ba, was intimately connected to breath. Sacred ceremonies, some of which involved specific breathing techniques, honored gods like Thoth, the deity of wisdom and writing, and Osiris, the god of resurrection and the afterlife. Breathing, in the Egyptian spiritual tradition, was not passive. It was participatory. It was a form of prayer. The ancient Taoists of China, who articulated their understanding of reality through the concept of qi, the life energy or vital force that moves through all living systems and through the natural world, developed breath practices through Qigong and other disciplines that were specifically designed to cultivate, direct, and harmonize this energy within the body. Their goal was alignment. Not alignment with some abstract spiritual ideal, but alignment with the actual movement of the natural world, with the rhythms of seasons, of rivers, of the turning of stars. To breathe in harmony with the Tao was not a metaphor for them. It was a practice, a discipline, a way of participating consciously in the order of the universe. In ancient Greece, the word psyche originally meant breath as well as soul. The philosopher Aristotle wrote about the relationship between breath and spirit. The Greek term phren referred simultaneously to the mind and the diaphragm, that dome-shaped muscle that drives breathing, acknowledging in the very structure of language what modern neuroscience is now articulating in detail: the connection between how we breathe and how we think, how we feel, how we experience ourselves and the world. In the Bible's book of Genesis, God breathes life into Adam. In the Gospel of John, Jesus breathes on his disciples. Breath is the vehicle of the sacred in so many traditions that the coincidence becomes its own kind of evidence. And then there is the simple fact that every living human being who has ever existed has breathed. Every one of them. The first human to ever look up at those Babylonian stars was breathing. The priest who pressed the first Göbekli Tepe pillar into the soil was breathing. The Maya mathematician who calculated the orbit of Venus to within 14 seconds per year was breathing. The Egyptian stoneworker who carved the morning star onto the inside of a pharaoh's coffin lid was breathing. They all breathed in the same world you breathe in now. The air itself is continuous. It has been cycling through lungs and leaves and oceans and clouds for as long as there have been lungs and leaves and oceans and clouds. The oxygen in your body right now has, in various forms, passed through the breathing systems of creatures you will never be able to name. Some of it has been water. Some of it has been frozen in glaciers. Some of it has been suspended in the atmosphere of another era entirely, breathed by something that no longer exists anywhere on Earth except in the fossil record. The breath is a river. You are one moment in it. In the garden, you sit down. It happens without decision, the way sitting always should happen, as a response to readiness rather than a plan. The ground accepts you as if it was waiting for you. The soft plants bend slightly around your weight without breaking. You breathe in. The air in this garden has a quality that you cannot quite name. It smells of growth, of deep earth, of something almost sweet. It feels as though it was made specifically for your lungs, which is of course absurd, and is also, in some way that the ancients would not have considered absurd at all, exactly accurate. You were made for this air. And this air was made for you. You and the atmosphere of this planet co-evolved over such a vast span of time that the relationship between human lungs and the Earth's atmosphere is not coincidental. It is the deepest kind of collaboration, the kind that makes things fit together perfectly, without anyone ever having to negotiate the terms. You breathe out. The trees take what you give. You breathe in. The trees give what they have. This exchange has been happening your entire life, and the entire lives of everyone before you, and will continue after you, faithful and unconcerned with your awareness of it. Your awareness of it is a gift to yourself, a moment of recognition of something that is true whether or not you're paying attention. The yogis would say, this is what presence is. Not the achievement of a quiet mind, not the absence of thoughts. Just this, the direct experience of being in a body that breathes, in a world that breathes, in a universe that is nothing but exchange and movement and the ceaseless offering of one thing to another. You breathe here for a long time. Or perhaps no time at all. In the garden, the difference is not sharp. Hashtag part 5, the river of time. Hashtag what the ancients knew about the great turning. Beyond the garden, through an archway so low that you must duck beneath it, and the ducking feels right, somehow, like a small physical act of humility before something important. The temple opens into its largest and most unexpected space. You are standing on a wide stone platform that overlooks a valley. The temple, it turns out, is built into a hillside. And this chamber has no outer wall. Where a wall might be, there is simply space, a wide, open view of a landscape at night, still and silver in the moonlight, with a river moving through the valley below you. Not crashing or rushing. Moving the way old rivers move, which is with the absolute confidence of something that has been doing this for so long that urgency is no longer a concept it holds any meaning for. The river is far below. Its voice is just barely audible from where you stand, a low, continuous sound like the murmur of a conversation in the next room. Present, grounding, not quite decipherable. You sit down on the edge of the platform, legs dangling over the edge, and you watch the river. This is what the ancients did, not just metaphorically, literally. Civilizations built themselves around rivers not only for practical reasons, fresh water, fertile floodplains, the ease of water transport, but because rivers taught something. Rivers modeled something about the nature of time and existence that was difficult to teach any other way. The ancient Egyptians built their entire civilization along the Nile, and the Nile shaped not just their agriculture, but their cosmology. The river flooded every year, predictably, reliably, inexorably. The floodwaters brought rich black silt that renewed the soil and made the desert bloom. For the Egyptians, this annual flooding was not merely a natural event. It was a cosmic renewal, the death of the previous year's fertility and the resurrection of new growth. They tracked the flooding using the heliacal rising of the star Sirius, the moment when Sirius, after 70 days of invisibility, reappeared above the eastern horizon just before sunrise. When Sirius rose, the flood was coming. The star became a calendar. The river became a teacher of time. The ancient Hindus, working within a cosmology of extraordinary temporal ambition, understood time as moving through vast cycles called kalpas, periods so long that they make our current scientific estimates of the universe's age look almost modest. A single day of Brahma, in Hindu cosmology, lasts 4.32 billion years. The universe is created at the beginning of one of Brahma's days and dissolves at its end, only to be recreated with the next dawn. These are not intended as literal astronomical calculations. They are a philosophical framework for understanding time as something that does not run in one direction and does not end. Time turns. Everything that happens is part of a turn, part of a cycle, part of a return. The Maya calendar, perhaps the most sophisticated timekeeping system ever developed by a pre-industrial civilization, embodied this understanding with extraordinary mathematical precision. Their long count calendar tracked a cycle of 1,872,000 days, approximately 5,125 years. When that cycle completed, it did not signal the end of time. It signaled the beginning of a new cycle. The calendar kept going had always been designed to keep going for what scholars estimate would be trillions of years into the future if maintained. The Maya had two primary calendars running simultaneously: the Hab, a 365-day solar calendar, and the Tzolk'in, a 260-day ritual calendar. These two calendars meshed together like interlocking gears, creating a larger cycle called the calendar round of 52 years, after which the same combination of Hab and Tzolk'in dates would not recur for another complete round. A person born in a particular year would not see their birth date recur in the same position of the calendar round until they were 52 years old. The Maya believed it took 52 years to attain full wisdom. The calendar and the human life were the same cycle. The Aztec calendar, shaped from the Maya tradition and elaborated in its own way, also ran on 52-year cycles and was visualized as a wheel, circular, turning. The famous sunstone, sometimes called the Aztec calendar, is a basalt disc more than 3.5 meters in diameter and weighing more than 24 tons, carved with extraordinary complexity and intended not as a simple timekeeping device, but as a cosmological statement. This is how time works, it says, without words. It turns. It renews. The sun at the center of the stone is not a sun that rises once and sets. It is a sun that is perpetually both rising and setting, perpetually in the act of renewal. The Babylonians, those great watchers of the sky, understood time as governed by astronomical cycles that could be mapped, predicted, and used to organize human life in harmony with cosmic patterns. The Great Saros cycle that let them predict eclipses was itself a cycle within cycles, a meeting of 3 other lunar cycles that recurred together every 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. When one eclipse occurred, another very similar one would follow in that interval. The sky was not random. It was rhythmic. And if you were patient enough, you could feel the rhythm and know what was coming. Even Plato, writing in ancient Greece in the 4th century BCE, understood time as cyclical. In his dialogue Timaeus, he wrote that time is the moving image of eternity, meaning that what we experience as the flow of time is the eternal, the unchanging, expressing itself through motion. The universe moves in great cycles, and within those cycles, smaller cycles, and within those, smaller ones still, all the way down to the rhythm of seasons and days, and the breath rising and falling in a living chest. You watch the river from your stone platform, and you understand something that the ancients understood so thoroughly they built it into their calendars and their monuments and their sacred texts. Nothing ends. Things transform. Things shift from one phase of a cycle to the next. Things grow and diminish and turn and return.
But end?
That is not what rivers do. That is not what stars do. That is not what seasons do. That is not what any of the great patterns that have been operating since long before any human thought to name them do. The river below you is not the same water it was an hour ago. Every molecule has moved on, is already somewhere else in the hydrological cycle, already becoming something new. But the river is still the river. The pattern persists. The shape persists. The river goes on being a river, even as everything that makes it a river passes through and keeps going. You are part of this pattern. The physical matter of your body has been cycling through this world for billions of years. The atoms that make your bones were forged inside stars that exploded before the solar system existed. The water in your blood has been ocean and cloud and ice and rain and ocean again across geological time. You are not separate from the great cycling of the universe. You are a particularly complex expression of it, one that, uniquely, can be aware of itself. One that can sit on a stone platform in the middle of an ancient temple and watch a river and think about what it means. That awareness is not a small thing. It may be the most extraordinary thing in the known universe. But tonight, you do not have to do anything with that awareness. You do not have to write it down or explain it to anyone or make any decisions based on it. You only have to feel it, the way the ancients felt it when they stood outside in the dark and looked up at the turning stars and understood, in their bodies before they understood in their minds, that the universe was old and vast and patient, and that they were inside it rather than outside it. You are inside it. You have always been inside it. The river moves below you, patient and unconcerned. The stars will slowly above. You breathe. You sit with the river for a long time, long enough that the moon moves, just barely perceptibly, across its arc above the valley. Long enough that the temperature shifts slightly, the cool of deeper night settling in around you like a quiet, undemanding companion. Long enough that the last urgency you brought into this temple has finally dissolved, or rather, has revealed itself to be what it always was, not the solid and weighty thing it pretended to be during the daylight hours, but something more like mist. Real while the conditions produced it, gone when the conditions changed. The conditions have changed. You breathe and watch the river, and something begins to form in the quiet space behind your thoughts. Not a new thought, exactly. More like the recognition of a pattern you have been living inside without seeing. The stars move in patterns. The stone remembers. The breath connects. The river turns. What if these are not separate lessons? What if the corridor you have been walking through tonight is not a sequence of separate rooms, but a single continuous thought expressed in different materials? The ancient Hermetic philosophers, those extraordinary thinkers who synthesized Egyptian wisdom with Greek philosophy in the remarkable intellectual melting pot of Alexandria, articulated a principle they called correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. The same laws that govern the movement of stars govern the movement of human lives. The same patterns that repeat in the seasons repeat in individual cycles of growth and decline and renewal. The same rhythms that structure geological time structure the time of a human lifetime. The same forces that move the river move the blood. This was not a metaphor for them. It was a description of reality as they had observed and experienced it, a reality in which the universe is a single system, thoroughly self-similar at every scale, following the same underlying logic from the infinitely large to the infinitely small. When you look at a nautilus shell cut in cross-section, you see the same logarithmic spiral that galaxies make. When you look at the branching of a river delta from above, it is almost indistinguishable from the branching of a tree, or the branching of blood vessels in a lung, or the branching of neurons in a brain. When you measure the growth patterns of certain plants, you find the Fibonacci sequence, the same mathematical relationship that appears in the spirals of pine cones, the arrangement of sunflower seeds, the curling of fern fronds, and the arms of spiral galaxies. The ancients noticed this long before they had the mathematics to describe it. They noticed it through watching and through feeling and through the kind of slow, patient attention that their lives, structured around the rhythms of nature rather than against them, naturally cultivated. And what they concluded, universally, across traditions that had no contact with each other, is that this self-similarity is not coincidental. It is the signature of a universe that is made of one thing, expressing itself in endless variation. The Upanishads called that one thing Brahman. The Taoists called it the Tao. The Hermetic philosophers called it the All, or sometimes mind, articulating their central principle as, all is mind, the universe is mental. The indigenous traditions of the Americas, Australia, and Africa spoke of it in terms of relation. Everything is related. Everything is connected. There are no isolated things. The physicists of the 20th and 21st centuries have been gradually developing a mathematical framework that points in the same direction. Quantum entanglement, the phenomenon where two particles that have interacted remain connected in a way that defies classical notions of space and distance, so that measuring one particle instantaneously determines the state of its partner regardless of how far apart they are, suggests a level of non-locality, of deep interconnection at the foundation of matter itself, that the ancient philosophers would have recognized as a description of what they were pointing at. Nothing stands alone. Every leaf is connected to the tree it grows from. Every tree is connected to the soil it roots in. The soil is connected to the water table below it, and the air above it, and the insects that live in it, and the birds that eat those insects, and the sun that warms the whole system, and the Earth's rotation that determines how long each day of sun lasts, and the gravitational relationship between Earth and Moon that governs the tides that move the oceans, that regulate the climate, that determines whether the rains come, that feed the water table, that feeds the tree. Pull on anything in the web of the world, and the whole web moves. The ancient Buddhist concept of interbeing, that word coined by the Vietnamese Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh to describe what the Buddhist tradition calls pratitya samutpada, or dependent origination, says exactly this. Nothing exists independently. Everything that exists does so in dependence on everything else. If you removed all of the conditions that allow a flower to be, there would be no flower. If you removed all of the conditions that allow you to be, there would be no you. This is not a reason for existential anxiety. It is a reason for the opposite. It is a recognition that you are woven into the fabric of something larger than yourself so thoroughly that you cannot be extracted from it. You are held. You have always been held. The holding is the very structure of reality. You watch the river turn the next curve in the valley below, and you think about how many rivers have turned that curve, in the sense that the water which was here a moment ago is already downstream, already somewhere else, already becoming the ocean that will become the cloud, that will become the rain, that will become the river again. And how the pattern of the turn in the river's course remains, printed into the landscape by hundreds of thousands of years of the river doing exactly this, making the same turn in the same place over and over until the shape of the turn is the shape of the valley, and the shape of the valley is the shape of the turn, and you cannot tell anymore which came first. That is what the ancient teachers were pointing at when they spoke of cycles. Not merely the passing of time, the accumulation of pattern. The way the same arc, repeated often enough, carves itself into the substance of the world and becomes the structure through which everything that follows must flow. You are not just passing through time. You are participating in its carving. Every life lived with attention, with care, with the kind of awareness that stops and looks up at the stars and feels the weight of stone and breathes in a garden and watches a river. Every life like that deepens the channel a little, makes it a little easier for the next person to find their way to the same understanding. Not through teaching necessarily, not through writing, just through the accumulated gravity of many lives having turned in the same direction, as the river turns, as the seasons turn, as the great gears of the Mayan calendar turn, faithful and mathematically precise, encoding in their turning the truth that the universe is not going anywhere except back to itself. You breathe. The river turns. The moon moves in its ancient arc, and you feel, settling through you like the warmth of a long-remembered fire, the particular peace that comes from understanding that you are not at the beginning of something or at the end of something, but in the middle of something that has no beginning and no end. Something that turns, something that returns. Something that holds you the way stone holds the warmth of a hand long after the hand has lifted and moved on. You do not notice when you stop watching the river and begin walking again. One moment you are sitting at the edge of the platform, and the next you are moving through another corridor, this one sloping gradually downward again, returning you to the warm interior heart of the temple where the air smells of old books and earth and stone, and something sweeter that you have come to associate tonight with the quality of understanding that does not need to be put into words. The corridor is lined with alcoves. In each alcove, a scroll, or something like a scroll, rolled and resting horizontally, made of a material you cannot identify, which glows softly from inside itself, as though the words within have been written in something luminous rather than merely dark.
You do not open them.
Something tells you that this room is not about reading. It is about knowing that the things worth knowing have been written, that someone was here before you, that someone sat in this very room, or one very much like it, across a great distance of time, and tried to set down in permanent form the things they had worked their entire lives to understand. The ancient library of Alexandria, in Egypt, may have held as many as 700,000 scrolls at its height, the largest collection of written knowledge ever assembled in the ancient world. It drew scholars from across the Mediterranean and beyond. It was a place where Egyptian knowledge and Babylonian knowledge and Greek knowledge and knowledge from Persia and India and everywhere between could sit side by side and be read and compared and synthesized. And in that comparison, patterns emerged. Truths that had been discovered independently by civilizations that never communicated with each other began to reveal themselves as versions of the same truth, seen from different angles, described in different languages, encoded in different myths and metaphors, but pointing, unmistakably, in the same direction. The scholar Eratosthenes, working in Alexandria around 200 BCE, calculated the circumference of the earth using nothing but a stick, the angle of a shadow at noon in two cities at a known distance from each other, and mathematics. He arrived at a figure of approximately 40,000 kilometers. The accepted modern measurement is 40,075 kilometers. He was off by less than 0.25%. From a stick and a shadow, through pure, careful, patient thinking. This is what human intelligence at its best has always been capable of. Not the hoarding of information, not the competition for resources, not the assertion of dominance, but the long, humble, dedicated practice of paying attention, noticing patterns, thinking carefully about what those patterns might mean, and then sharing what was found. The great teachers of every tradition understood this. The Confucian scholar who spent a lifetime studying the nature of virtue. The Buddhist monk who meditated for years on the nature of mind. The Sufi mystic who wrote poetry about the nature of love. The Vedantic philosopher who traced the relationship between the individual self and the universal self across hundreds of pages of careful argument. The shaman who knew every plant in every season and every ceremony appropriate to every illness and every transition in a human life. All of them doing the same thing, in different costumes, in different languages, in different centuries, paying attention and sharing what they found. What they found, what the accumulated weight of the world's wisdom traditions agrees upon, quietly and without requiring that you accept any particular theology, is something very simple. You are not as alone as you sometimes feel. The universe is not indifferent to your existence, not in a personal, interventionist way necessarily, but in the way that the ocean is not indifferent to the wave it forms. The wave is not a separate thing that the ocean is merely tolerating. The wave is the ocean doing what oceans do. And the ocean surrounds the wave, supports it, gives it everything it is made of, receives it back when it falls, and will form another wave in the next moment. This is not indifference. This is the deepest kind of participation. The Vedic tradition said, "You are that. You are Brahman, the ultimate reality, wearing the temporary costume of a person. When you forget this, you suffer because you have mistaken the costume for the self. When you remember it, you are free, not from the challenges of life, which continue regardless, but from the loneliness and fear that come from believing you are facing those challenges in isolation, in a universe that does not know you are there." The Taoist tradition said, "You are the Tao, not a part of the Tao, not an expression of the Tao. You are the Tao, moving as you move, breathing as you breathe, thinking as you think. The bamboo does not fight the wind. The river does not fight the rocks. The Tao does not resist the Tao." When you stop fighting the nature of things, including the nature of yourself, you discover that you are never in conflict with anything except your own idea of how things should be different from how they are. The Buddhist tradition said, "Look carefully at what you call the self, and you will find that it has no fixed edges. It is not a thing. It is a process, a pattern, a convenient story the mind tells about an ever-changing collection of sensations and thoughts and perceptions." And when you see this clearly, really see it, not as an intellectual concept, but as a direct experience, the suffering that comes from clinging to that story begins to relax, because you have seen through it. Not negatively, not nihilistically, with relief, with the particular lightness that comes from setting down something heavy you had forgotten you were carrying. And the Hermetic tradition, perhaps most simply of all, said, "The universe is mind. Consciousness is fundamental. Matter is an expression of it, not the other way around." And what this means, in its most intimate implication, is that you, as a conscious being, are not an anomaly in a mechanical universe. You are the universe's capacity for self-awareness, temporarily located in a particular body at a particular moment in a particular history. The scrolls glow softly in their alcoves. The room is warm and still. You do not need to read any of them. What they contain you already carry, not as information in your head, not as beliefs in your mind, as a quality in your body, as the breath that keeps coming without being called, as the warmth in your hands, as the weight of your own body settled into this room, this moment, this ancient and unhurried present. And the ocean surrounds the wave, supports it, gives it everything it is made of, receives it back when it falls, and will form another wave in the next moment. This is not indifference. This is the deepest kind of participation. The Vedic tradition said, "You are that. You are Brahman, the ultimate reality, wearing the temporary costume of a person. When you forget this, you suffer, because you have mistaken the costume for the self. When you remember it, you are free, not from the challenges of life, which continue regardless, but from the loneliness and fear that come from believing you are facing those challenges in isolation, in a universe that does not know you are there. The Taoist tradition said, "You are the Tao, not a part of the Tao, not an expression of the Tao. You are the Tao, moving as you move, breathing as you breathe, thinking as you think. The bamboo does not fight the wind. The river does not fight the rocks. The Tao does not resist the Tao." When you stop fighting the nature of things, including the nature of yourself, you discover that you are never in conflict with anything except your own idea of how things should be different from how they are. The Buddhist tradition said, "Look carefully at what you call the self, and you will find that it has no fixed edges. It is not a thing. It is a process, a pattern, a convenient story the mind tells about an ever-changing collection of sensations and thoughts and perceptions." And when you see this clearly, really see it, not as an intellectual concept, but as a direct experience, the suffering that comes from clinging to that story begins to relax, because you have seen through it. Not negatively, not nihilistically, with relief, with the particular lightness that comes from setting down something heavy you had forgotten you were carrying. And the Hermetic tradition, perhaps most simply of all, said, "The universe is mind. Consciousness is fundamental. Matter is an expression of it, not the other way around." And what this means in its most intimate implication is that you, as a conscious being, are not an anomaly in a mechanical universe. You are the universe's capacity for self-awareness, temporarily located in a particular body at a particular moment in a particular history. The scrolls glow softly in their alcoves. The room is warm and still. You do not need to read any of them. What they contain, you already carry, not as information in your head, not as beliefs in your mind, as a quality in your body, as the breath that keeps coming without being called, as the warmth in your hands, as the weight of your own body settled into this room, this moment, this ancient and unhurried present. Socrates, the philosopher who taught in the streets and markets of Athens in the late 5th century BCE and who was eventually put to death by the Athenian state for asking too many uncomfortable questions, built his entire philosophical method around the same principle. He claimed to know only one thing, that he knew nothing. And from that position of radical epistemic humility, he asked questions. Not rhetorical questions designed to lead his interlocutors to predetermined conclusions, but genuine questions, open-ended and deep, aimed at discovering what was actually true rather than confirming what was comfortable. The Delphic oracle's injunction and Socrates' method point at the same thing. The beginning of wisdom is the willingness to look at yourself honestly, not judgmentally, not with the harsh eye of self-criticism, which is just another form of avoidance, another way of performing engagement without actually engaging, with curiosity, with the same patient, careful attention that the Babylonian astronomer gave to the night sky. What is actually here? What does this actually look like when I stop telling myself what it should look like? The Zen tradition, which developed in China and Japan as a fusion of Indian Buddhist philosophy with Chinese Taoist thought, developed a set of practices, meditation, the koan, the retreat, specifically designed to strip away the habitual layers of mental commentary that prevent a direct encounter with the nature of one's own mind. The Zen masters were not interested in doctrine. They were not interested in concepts or beliefs. They were interested in direct experience. What is actually happening right now? Not what should be happening. Not what the texts say should be happening. What is actually, undeniably, unmistakably here? The answer, when everything habitual is stripped away, is said to be luminous. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming. Just clear. Just present. Just aware, without the narration. This is what the Library of Scrolls is not about. The scrolls are beautiful. The scrolls are important. The scrolls are the record of thousands of years of people trying to put into words what happens when all the words fall away. And that record matters. It points, as Laozi said, at the moon.
But the moon is not in the library.
The moon is outside. You are inside. And you are the one inside who contains the capacity to know the moon directly, not through reading about it, not through understanding its phases and its gravitational relationship with the Earth and its distance from the surface and its reflectivity, but through looking at it. Through stepping outside and looking up and letting the light that has traveled 384,000 kilometers arrive at your eyes and seeing, with the wordless directness of perception itself, the moon. That capacity, the capacity for direct experience, for unmediated awareness, for perception that precedes interpretation, is what you brought into this temple with you. It is what you will carry out of it. It is what the ancients were trying to cultivate in their students when they sent them out to watch the stars, or carved them into the presence of stone monoliths at dawn, or taught them to breathe consciously, or brought them to sit beside rivers in silence. They were not giving them information. They were teaching them to be awake. And being awake, it turns out, is not difficult. It does not require any special equipment, any particular belief, any initiation or ceremony, or years of practice. It requires only the willingness to stop for a moment and notice what is actually happening. You are sitting in a room. There is stone behind you and stone on either side of you and stone beneath you, and the soft glow of old scrolls in front of you. There is air around you, and you are breathing it. Your heart is beating. You can probably feel it if you listen for it. Somewhere in your chest, steady and unconcerned, doing the same thing it has been doing since before you were born, the same thing it will do tonight while you sleep, the same thing it will do for as long as you are alive. Not requiring your supervision, not waiting for your permission, just beating. That beat is ancient. That beat has been happening in living things for hundreds of millions of years, in hearts of every size and shape and evolutionary design. And when you feel it in your own chest, you are feeling something that connects you through an unbroken chain of heartbeats, all the way back to the first creature whose blood circulated and whose life depended on the circulation. The temple holds all of this. The stone remembers it. The stars above can see it. And you, breathing and heart-beating in this library of ancient knowing, are the living proof of all of it, the most extraordinary archive the universe has ever produced. Not because you are exceptional, because you are here, because you exist at all, because against all the vast silence of all the space that contains nothing, you are something. You are aware. You are, right now, the universe knowing itself. Let your eyes close. Let the scrolls continue to glow, faithful in their alcoves. You have read enough for tonight. You have understood enough. The rest can wait until morning, which will come in its own time, as mornings do, as they have always done, reliable as the star Sirius rising before the Nile's flood, reliable as the midwinter sun entering Stonehenge's great arc, reliable as the Maya calendar turning over its great gears into the next cycle. The morning will come, and you will be there to meet it, rested and more whole than you were when you arrived here tonight. But for now, not morning.
Not yet.
For now, only the library. For now, only the scrolls and the stone, and the breath and the heartbeat. For now, only this. You let yourself become still. The thoughts you came in with, the unfinished things, the conversations you have had, the decisions that feel heavy even when you set them down and step away from them, they are still there, technically, but they have changed character. They have lost their urgency without losing their reality. They are still true, whatever they are. They are still yours. They will still be there in the morning, which is the appropriate time to deal with things that need dealing with. Right now, it is not morning. Right now, you are somewhere very ancient, surrounded by the quiet evidence that human beings have been doing exactly this, seeking stillness, seeking understanding, seeking the thing underneath all the noise, for as long as there have been human beings. 11,000 years ago on a hilltop in Turkey. 4,500 years ago on the chalk downs of England. 5,000 years ago in the Nile Valley. 3,000 years ago in the mountains of India. 2,500 years ago in a garden in China, where an old man who had just decided to leave the world he knew forever wrote a book in one sitting for a border guard who asked him, before he disappeared, to write down what he knew. They were all looking for the same thing. They were all finding versions of the same answer. And the answer was never complicated. It was only the language they wrapped around it that became complicated, because language is a human tool, and human tools are always imperfect. The answer was something like, be here, be aware, know that you are part of something larger than your own story. Know that the larger thing is not indifferent to you. Know that time turns and returns, and what feels like ending is only transition. Know that the breath is a gift. Know that the stars are patient. Know that the stone remembers. Know that the silence is not empty. Know that you are not alone in any of the ways that matter. You breathe. The amber light in the library dims very slowly, as though it is following your breathing and matching it, growing softer as your breath grows slower and your body grows heavier, and the boundary between being awake and being asleep becomes permeable and then blurry, and then all but meaningless. The river is still somewhere out beyond the temple walls, moving through its ancient valley in the silver moonlight. The stars are still overhead, their light still traveling at 300,000 kilometers per second in all directions, arriving at any open eye that cares to look up. The handprints are still in the stone of the inner chamber, thousands of them. The warmth of the hands that made them long since absorbed into the planet's own deep heat, but the shapes remaining, faithful and complete. The scrolls glow. The garden breathes. The stone is patient. You breathe out, and you do not rush to breathe back in, because there is no rushing here. There is no urgency. There is only this very ancient place and this very old darkness and the accumulated wisdom of everyone who ever sat still long enough to understand that sitting still was where the wisdom was waiting. In the silence, in the simplicity, in the direct and unadorned experience of being alive in a universe that is not hostile to that aliveness, but in fact requires it, in some sense, requires someone to be aware, to look up, to feel the weight of the stone, to breathe the air, to watch the river. The universe requires a witness, and you are that. You are, right now, the universe's witness to itself.
And that is enough.
That is more than enough. That is everything. The temple grows soft at the edges. This is what happens to places late at night when you are almost asleep, but not quite. They become less architectural and more atmospheric. Less stone and light, and more the feeling of stone and light, the impression of a space you have moved through and been changed by, even if the change is as subtle as the change the river makes in the valley floor, imperceptible in any single day, total in the long run. You have moved through something tonight, not through a physical place, though the physical place has served as a frame. You have moved through an understanding, through a quality of attention that the ancients spent their lives cultivating and that you have arrived at on this night, through the simple act of giving yourself permission to be still and let something older than your own thoughts speak. The Babylonians built their watchtowers. They climbed them every clear night and tilted their faces toward the sky and watched and recorded and passed it on. What they were passing on was not only astronomical data, it was the practice, the act of attention itself. The willingness to look carefully at something vast and say, I don't understand all of this yet. I may never understand all of this, but I'm going to keep looking. There is something deeply moving about that. The image of a Babylonian priest 6,000 years ago, climbing to the top of a mud brick tower somewhere between the Tigris and Euphrates on a clear night, and tilting his face toward the stars. He did not have a name for the phenomenon he was observing. He did not have the mathematical framework that would eventually allow those observations to be turned into predictive models. He just had his eyes and the sky and the discipline to show up again and pay attention.
He was doing what you are doing right now.
In a different costume, in a different century, looking up at the same stars that are still turning in the same patterns above this building, above this room, above your closed eyes. The stars he watched are still there. Some of them, the brightest, the most distinctive, the ones that would have been most useful as navigational or calendrical markers, are the same stars you can see on any clear night, their light still arriving after its long journey, still carrying whatever information it carries about the nature of a universe that is old enough to be patient with the pace at which its creatures are learning to understand it. The builders of Göbekli Tepe carved their animals into stone pillars more than 11,000 years ago, and then buried them. There is no way to know exactly what they were thinking, but there is something in the act of burying sacred work, protecting it from the present, and trusting it to the future, that speaks of a kind of faith in time, a belief that time is not only loss, that things buried can be found, that what is hidden can be revealed. We found them. After 11,000 years, we found them, and we are still trying to understand what they were for, and perhaps the not understanding is the point. Perhaps the structure they built was not a message in a bottle, was not an attempt to communicate specific information, but was an act in itself, complete in the doing, meaningful in the intention, preserved not because it needed to be decoded, but because it needed to persist. A human hand on the world, an insistence on reality. The ancient yogis developed their breath practices over thousands of years and passed them forward, teacher to student, generation after generation, an unbroken chain of living transmission. What they were transmitting was not just a technique. It was a relationship with the body, with the breath, with the life force that moves through living things the way the river moves through the valley, not separately, not distantly, but as the very thing those living things are made of. The Upanishads, written between 800 and 400 BCE, but encoding wisdom that had been circulating in living oral tradition for centuries before that, described the self, the Atman, as identical to the universal consciousness, Brahman. The self is not contained inside the body the way water is contained inside a vessel. The body is contained inside the self the way a wave is contained inside the ocean. The wave arises. The wave persists for a time. The wave subsides. The ocean remains, and was never, at any point, separate from the wave, because the wave was never made of anything except ocean. You are the ocean. Tonight, temporarily, you are the wave. And in the softening and slowing that comes with approaching sleep, the edges of the wave are becoming less distinct, less defined. The border between you and the room, between you and the night, between you and the long continuous history of human beings who have sat in places like this and felt what you are feeling now, that border is not exactly dissolving, but it is becoming more permeable, more symbolic than solid. The Maya calendar, their extraordinary, patient, mathematically exquisite calendar, did not end on December 21st, 2012. It began a new cycle. Scholars who actually read the Dresden Codex and the other surviving Maya astronomical texts note that the Maya were projecting their calendar forward by what would amount to billions of years. There was never any Maya prediction of an ending. There was only the Maya understanding that cycles complete and new cycles begin, and that what looks like an ending, seen from inside the cycle, is really the preparation for a return. You are in that position right now. This day is completing its cycle. This wakefulness is turning toward its own kind of sleep. The thoughts and concerns that define the last cycle of hours are settling, releasing their claim on your attention, returning to whatever quiet pool thoughts return to when they are no longer needed for the next few hours. And something is coming. Not a new day yet. That will wait. Something simpler is coming first. The rest that the body has been waiting for. The silence that the mind has been earning, the darkness that is not emptiness but full of everything that does not require light to be real. The Egyptians called those circumpolar stars the indestructibles because they never set, never dipped below the horizon. They were always there, even in the daylight when you could not see them. Always there, turning in their patient circles, faithful as physics, permanent as the laws that govern all of matter. You are like that. The you that is reading this, the awareness, the capacity for experience, the something rather than nothing that is always there. Even when you sleep, even when you dream, Even in the deepest dreamless sleep, something continues. Something maintains the heartbeat. Something keeps the breath going. Something remains present at the most fundamental level while the thinking, planning, worrying surface mind takes its necessary rest. That something is what every tradition has been pointing at. Call it what you like. Call it the Atman or the Tao or the Buddha nature or the soul or the divine spark or the witness or simply awareness, capitalized or lowercase, with or without a theology wrapped around it. Every tradition that ever tried to name it admitted, in their most honest moments, that the name was not the thing. The finger is not the moon. The map is not the territory. The word breath is not the breath. The ancient Egyptians knew this when they said that the true name of a god was a mystery beyond all human language. The Taoists knew it when Laozi opened his entire philosophical work by saying the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. The Vedants knew it when they described Brahman as neti neti, not this, because every description you could offer of it would be less than it, would reduce it, would substitute a mental image for the living reality. It does not require the name. It was there before language. It will be there when the story is done. All of this, all that you have seen tonight, all these chambers and corridors and gardens and rivers and starlit ceilings, all of this is being received by that which was always here, waiting for you to find a quiet enough moment to notice it. You have noticed it now. You are it. The rest is the form it takes on this particular night, in this particular body, in this particular ancient and unhurried place where the stars breathe above and the river moves below, and the stone holds its patient position, and the garden breathes in the dark, and the scrolls glow in their alcoves like embers of a fire that was burning before you arrived and will burn long after you have gone. The ancients do not need to be remembered, only felt, and they're felt
right now.
In the breath you are breathing, in the weight of your body, in the warmth behind your closed eyes, in the heartbeat steady and ancient and here.
Sleep now.
The temple will keep, the stars will keep, the river will keep, and when you wake, the world will still be ancient and patient and full of things that have been trying for a very long time to tell you something simple. For now, you only have to sleep. For now, you only have to breathe. For now, you only have to let the oldest silence in the world do what it has always done. Hold you, quietly, completely, and without any need for anything in return. Breathe in and breathe out and follow the breath down, down and down, into the dark that is not empty, into the stillness that is not absence, into the sleep that the ancients also slept beneath these same stars, inside this same turning world, as part of this same vast, breathing, patient, ancient universe that has been here all along, waiting for you to remember. It remembers you.
Rest now.
Sleep well.
Hashtag outro. Subscribe e sleep.
And there we have it, dear traveler. The Temple of Ancient Knowing. If this story helped you find your way to rest tonight, I would love it if you would take a small moment tomorrow, when you are awake and thinking clearly, to like this video and subscribe to Sleep Bedtime Stories. Every subscriber helps us keep making these long, slow, peaceful stories for people who need exactly this kind of night. You can also leave a comment letting me know what you'd like to explore next. There are so many ancient worlds still to visit. So many temples and rivers and starlit plains still to walk through together.
But for now, rest.
You have done enough. The stars are watching, patient as they have always been. The earth holds you, steady as stone. And wherever your dreams take you tonight, I hope they are gentle.
Good night.